Terry Conklin. I own Raspberry Knoll Farm in North Windham with my husband Peter. We bought this place in August of 2009. We started planting the raspberries in 2010. We opened for business in 2011. We planted blueberries in 2012 and opened those 3 years later. And then about 4 years ago, we planted strawberries. So we open when strawberries are ready, which is usually the beginning of June. This year it was like the second week in June, so it kind of varies. We have our raspberries that come in the end of June, and we have those until we close in mid-September, and then the blueberries and blackberries that come in mid-July, and those usually run till mid-August or a little later. Last year, blueberries ran up until we closed in September, which was not normal, and that was okay. It was nice to have berries that long. We used to stay open until Halloween. And then we realized after several years it wasn't really worth it. People get into an apple mode in the fall. They're not into raspberries. And then they would only come out on weekends because kids are back in school. So it's kind of tough to market raspberries when you only have weekend sales and nothing really during the week. Pick your own, there's a couple reasons. One is it's nice to have families come out. People like to get out in nature and pick their own. The kids enjoy it. It's something new. It gets them out to see where their food comes from. So they enjoy that. It's also a labor issue. So if we didn't do pick your own, we'd be having to pick and either sell directly at our stand or sell for wholesale, which adds a component to it with trying to get labor. We didn't want to deal with having to find a wholesale market to sell them at, and so we just decided we're going to go with pick your own. And then we have a farm stand, so we do pick for the stand. We don't have huge volumes, so we have a very small labor force. I have another job. My full-time job is at Econ, so this is my second job I do here, and my husband's here full-time, and then we have 3 part-time people. We do most of the field work ourselves. So in the farm stand we have berries that we pick. We also have jams. My sister makes all of our jams from our berries. We have honey. We used to have our honey here, and we've done bees for several years. This past winter we lost our last hives, so we have a gentleman that used to work for us and retired in his 80s last year, and he does bees. So we buy the honey from him and sell that here at our stand. We have cut your own flowers, so we have those that people can buy, and up until this year we've had bouquets. We have cut your own herbs, vegetables that we grow, we pick, and we have those for sale in the stand. We don't sell at farmers markets. We don't have labor to do a farmers market, so we sell everything right here through our stand. And with the COVID-19 this year, we did make some changes to the farm. We used to have everybody come in and out through the farm stand, but to keep everybody physically distanced, we opened a new entrance. You come in through one part of the farm and you go out through the farm stand when you check out that way. Masks are required at all times, even in the field. We've had some people ask why, and the big reason is, you get focused on your picking and you're not paying attention to where other people are around you. And someone may walk right by you and be less than 6 feet from you at that time. So it's a safety thing. We want to keep our staff safe. We want to keep our family safe. And we want to make sure our customers are safe too. We do advertise that is it, so there's no surprise when you come here. But we also have a sign at our entrance with the farm rules. So that's a new one. The entrance is new. Keep the 6-foot distance between you and others is new. We have not had to go to reservations for picking, because so far everybody's been really good about trying to keep a distance from other people, so we haven't had to worry about that. I know some farms have had to go to the reservation system, but we're fortunate we have not had to do that. We don't allow pets, but we've never allowed pets, because we're producing food, and you can't control where your pet decides to do their business. We don't even let our dogs out in the berry field unless they're on the golf cart attached. People used to be able to bring their own containers. Most people didn't. They would use the containers we provided. But once in a while you get someone who brings their own container, and the Department of Ag in Connecticut this year said no. And I understand their reasoning, because we'd have to get another scale, but we also would have to disinfect our scale every time you put it on, both at the entrance and also in the farm stand. So this year you have to go with the containers that we supply. Hopefully next year that won't be an issue, but most people don't bring a container with them anyway. So that worked out fine. We're cash only. We're a small operation, and because we're small, we've decided that we don't want to incur the expenses of a credit card or a debit card. We advertise that on all of our social media, on our website, it's on our phone message, so people know in advance to bring cash. We do have an ATM right down the end of the road, which is perfect, so we'll send people down there if they find they don't have enough money when they get here. So that works out well for us. We are always closed on Mondays. I figured I had to give my husband at least one day off. Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday we were 9 to 5. Thursday we do stay open until 7 o'clock. And then on Saturdays we open at 8:30 and we close at 5. For those who want to pick flowers, they have an event coming up or whatever, but need to get a flower bouquet early, all they have to do is contact us. And then we will open for that early. Because there are times when you might want to come out at 7 o'clock and get your flowers cut early before the sun comes up or before it gets really hot mostly. So if we have to close, it goes on our phone message system, it goes on Facebook, it goes on the website. We also have an email list. Any way that we can let people know if we have to close, we do advertise that. You know, when it's going to be 100 degrees out, people shouldn't be out picking. So we did close early. That one we advertised because we knew in advance it was going to be that hot. And we just put a sign up that, you know, closed due to excessive heat. Once in a while we end up having to close if we get deluged. We had a couple inches of rain last year and everything just kind of got nailed. And we did need to close for one day on that, and then we reopened. We've had to close berry fields occasionally for ripening. There are times when the raspberries get totally picked out before the rest of the field opens up. We've had to close that field for a day and let things ripen up a little bit more. CSA is community supported agriculture. You sign up and pay in the spring, so it gives you a little bit of upfront cash before you start opening. For some places they use it to pay labor to get things going. We use it for our seeds, we use it for heating the tunnel, for the tomatoes as well. So it's that little bit of startup cash that kind of helps. There are many different types of CSA programs out there. You can join one at a farm which will give you a box of produce every week, or you get to pick this and that. Ours is a debit system, which works out well for us. So you can join with different increments, and then you get 5% over. But then you can come and shop whenever you want. You go on vacation, you don't have to worry about it. We do specials occasionally for CSA members only that are not advertised for the public. So we had one with tomatoes earlier in July. We're not open when most of our asparagus comes in, so they get that as well. They can place their orders for that and come pick it up. And then after we close in September, we do have an afternoon evening where CSA members can come out and pick whatever berries they want, cut flowers, herbs, vegetables that we have left. They can take some of the vegetables. We've had people who've been with us every year. We give you a card. We have a card in there with your name on it, and then all the sales that you have go on that, and so you always know what your balance is at all times. There's no big surprise. You don't come in one day and find out that you're totally out of money. You know, it's $50 increments. It used to be $100 increments, and this year we had a few people ask if it could be, instead of doing 200 or 300, could they do like 250? It depends on what works out for you. What I do tell folks, if this is your first time and you think you're going to spend 300, then do 200. Because if you don't use it all up, you lose it. We don't carry over to the next year. And every year is a fresh start. Even when you run out, you can still come and shop. You just have to bring cash. So I'd rather somebody run out early and then figure out what they need to do the following year. And if you need to bump it up the next year, then bump it up the next year. But I'd rather do that than end up at the end of the season and sit there with a balance on your account. Well, my husband Pete has been in farming his entire life. We knew we wanted to get into berries. We had done our market research, and there wasn't an awful lot of farms that main focus was berries. A lot of them have berries, but it's not their main focus. So we found this farm and said, okay, well, we're going to do berries. So the main thing was raspberries, and then we expanded to blueberries and then to the strawberries. The strawberries we've gotten from Norse Farms in Massachusetts and also from Crohn's in Michigan. Our blueberries and our raspberries and blackberries we've gotten from Norse Farms in Massachusetts. So this farm is 65 acres. We don't farm the whole thing. We farm about 15 acres right now. We have to fence in any area that we want to grow anything in to keep wildlife out. So these are hay fields. Long before that, they had cows here, but the most recent future before we bought this was just hay. For all of our fields, we soil test first. We make sure our pH is where it needs to be. These were hay fields when we bought the farm. They had not been limed in a while. They were down in the 5, so we've limed everything. And we retest every 3 to 4 years, and then we add any amendments that we need to at that time as well. So we get our nutrient levels up, we get our pH up, which is the critical one before we plant. Our blueberry fields, the pH was a little high when we planted, so we sulfured that field to get that pH down to between 4.5 and 5. Everything else we grow really wants to be 6 to 6.5. So for our crops that are already in the ground and growing, we do tissue sampling. We rotate around the different blocks every year, and we combine that with our soil test to figure out what exactly we need, and then we put a blend together based on that. So there isn't any go-to fertilizer material for us. It depends on what the crop needs. So about this time of the year is a good time to go take the leaves. So we do one variety and 60 to 100 leaves, the most recently mature leaves on the plants, and then you send those in to the diagnostic lab at UConn, the soil testing lab. They will test those things and come back and tell you what's in the plant. So a soil test will tell you what is in the soil and available, but it doesn't tell you what's in the plant. And so by using the tissue sampling, then we know what's in the plant. And then we can combine those two together, the soil test results and the tissue results, and fine-tune our fertilizer program. So the soil test just says pH, and it doesn't do nitrogen, it does magnesium, potassium, calcium. But then with tissue samples, does the macro and the micronutrients. We're not an organic farm. That said, most of our stuff is not sprayed. So our flowers and our herbs are never sprayed. We don't use just organic fertilizers on them either. So the fact that we don't use just organic fertilizers, they're not considered organic. So yeah, the whole farm, all our production areas are irrigated. The farm is on an automatic irrigation system with drip irrigation. We don't fertilize through the lines for anything out in the field, but we do have a well that's dedicated just for the farm. And then we have a computerized irrigation system with about 21 zones on it that my husband Pete takes care of. That's his little bailiwick. He sets it up. So once we start in the spring, it goes until we close. Some fields will shut down early. It's like the strawberry field that we picked this year that's no longer in production. We've shut that one. Other fields, when we're done with them, we'll shut it down in the fall. Some early, some late. Vegetables, clearly, when we're done picking that particular field, we shut that one down. And then we have soil moisture sensors in the ground, so we know, if we have 3-4 inches of rain, then clearly we don't need to keep the irrigation running, and we'll shut it off. But with drip irrigation, that's not a catch-up type of system. That's the kind of system that you want to start before you run into a deficit. You want to keep it at a certain level the whole time. We have 2 fields that we rotate with for strawberries, so we only keep them in production for 3 to 4 years. After that, the production goes downhill very quickly. Weeds kind of consume things too after a while, so it's a good time to move them out and move into a new field. So they are a fairly short-lived perennial plant. We just do the June-bearing strawberries. We don't have any day neutrals. We're not looking for strawberries for late summer into the fall. We're just looking for that for the early season. So now we have 2 fields dedicated to strawberries, one that's in cover crops for about 3 years and the other that's in the strawberries for that length of time. So we use several different materials for cover cropping. We like the radish because it will penetrate any compacted soils, and with tractors going down the rows, people walking down the rows, those areas of the field tend to get compacted, so the radish helps loosen that soil up. We also use buckwheat, which we really like, winter rye, sorghum, sedan grass. So we do a mixture of different materials, different kinds of cover crops. We try to get one in early summer, and then we come back in the fall and do another one that hopefully will carry us through the winter. Sometimes some of them will winter kill, but they add organic matter to the soil, which we really like, build up the nutrient levels in the soil, and break up any hard pan that we may have developed over that time. So our new field of strawberries is on plastic mulch, although we do straw on the strawberries for the winter, and then we move it off the plants in the springtime, and that goes down between the rows, which helps when it rains. We don't end up with splashing up onto the berries, and hopefully we have enough under the berries so that they stay relatively clean and not sit on the soil. Because any berry that sits on the soil is going to get mold. So for strawberries, we're concerned with gray mold. There are several that attack them, but gray mold is the only one that we really worry about here. So if we have a wet spring, we definitely have to put a fungicide spray on to help reduce that problem, or we're going to end up with a field of rotten berries. And as far as insects, we don't spray for insects here. I do monitor for them, so tarnished plant bug, we do get some injury from that, which gives you, the regular strawberry at the bottom, it would have like a button. That's what it looks like. So it's a little deformed on the bottom, but that's just from feeding. It's not from laying an egg, so you don't have anything in it. Slugs are probably the worst problem we have, and so we'll take precautions on that one starting next year, because apparently our slug population is pretty high. But that's really the only insect that we have serious problems with. So we have about 1.5 acres of raspberries and blackberries. We have several different kinds. So we have summer that come in the end of June, and then they'll be done by mid-August. We set it up so that our first variety comes in and then the others come in sequence, but then you hit the heat of July and then the rest of them all just kind of come in. And then we have maybe a week delay between the summer and the fall raspberries. And then we have our fall varieties that start coming in. And we have 3 different varieties of those. Our summers, we have a red, we have a yellow blush, black raspberry, and a purple raspberry. So we have different colors, which this is the first year we've had them all come in, and people kind of enjoy that. So our fall varieties, we do have a yellow, and then the others are reds. Those will be for late August to have those in when we close in September. Well, our first raspberry is Prelude. Now we have Moutier, Encore, and Taylor. We have Anne, which is yellow for fall. We have a double gold, which is a yellow blush. We have Jewel for a black raspberry, Royalty, purple raspberry, and then we have Natchez as our blackberry. And those are nice. They get to be about 1.5 inches, 2 inches long, so people really like those big blackberries. We have 3 rows that are 250 feet long of blackberries. Blackberries are very heavy producers, particularly the Natchez. That gives us enough for people to pick. We have them in the stand, and then we also can make jam. So far, that 3 rows is working real well for us. Our raspberries and blackberries, we do have to spray because we get wet times and we get gray mold. And if we don't cover them up, the same thing with strawberries, if we don't spray for gray mold, we will not have a crop. That's the only disease that we're concerned about. There are other diseases that impact it, but we're not concerned with the others. With their raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries, they're long-lived perennial. The raspberries, we're hoping to keep these for about 20 years before we have to start replacing. Raspberries we prune during the summer as well as fall and winter. We are trellised to keep the canes growing up, but we do get canes that come out and sprawl out, so we will go through some of the varieties in the summer, cut out those excess canes on the sides to make it easier for picking, and we don't need those anyway. And then we'll come back in the fall and winter and take out, for the summer varieties, we take out all the canes that had the crop that year, and then we select the best new canes that came up that summer for next year's crop. And so then for the fall varieties that we have, which are Himbo Top and Autumn Britain, when we finish picking those, we just cut those right down to the ground, because the new canes coming up the next year will give us a crop that fall. The raspberries will produce new canes off the roots, so they can, if you're a homeowner, they can get out into your lawn. They can get out into our walkways, but we mow, so you can mow them right off. Blackberries and black raspberries come up only from the crown, but that crown gets larger over time, so they don't come up off the roots. So you can kind of keep your plants together. They don't generally go out into your lawn and take it over. So blueberries, we have a little over half an acre. We have 3 different varieties. We have Rika, Blue Crop, and Patriot. The idea, we have an early, a mid, and a late season variety, so it extends our harvest for over a month. So blueberries require a pH of 4.5 to 5. So we tested the ground the year before we planted it, and it was mid-5s, so we applied sulfur and worked that into the ground to get that pH down beforehand. You could do it the same year you plant, but you're better off if you can do it a year in advance, so then the plants really are not under stress that first year. And we also, at the same time, added whatever nutrients we needed to get them to the levels they should be. We usually open the field by mid-July. This year they started ripening a little earlier than that, but we wanted to get a volume of berries before we open the field, because we don't want people coming in, picking it clean, and then being frustrated that there isn't much there. It's unlike raspberries, where once you start getting them ripe, you need to pick them. The blueberries, we can wait a little while. The birds are probably our biggest problem. There's 37 different types of birds that like blueberries, so you can see we have the netting. It doesn't keep all the birds out. They'll find a way in, but then they can't remember how they got in, so they don't get back out. So we'll occasionally open 2 ends and then try to chase them out one end of the field. You get a lot of them out, but you still get a few that hang around in there. They'll do a lot. If we didn't net it at all, we would probably lose the bulk of the crop to them. So at least we're not sharing the whole crop with them. We're just sharing a little bit with them. And the blueberries, we prune those late winter, usually very early spring. It gives us an idea if we've had any winter injury on them at the same time. And those we will take out 2 to 3 of the oldest canes, and we select 2 to 3 new ones that came up that are the strongest ones, and then get rid of the old ones. But we prune those every single year. On the blueberries, we do wood chips. We don't do it every year. We do it anywhere from 2 to 4 years. We get the wood chips and spread those down, and they break down too. The nice thing about wood chips on blueberries is blueberries are a very shallow-rooted plant. So the wood chips will help maintain the soil moisture level, and also kind of keeps the temperature of the soil moderated, so we don't have typical highs and lows, and we don't also dry out as much. Although we are irrigated, the wood chips still help. Plus they add organic matter to the soil as they break down too. There's only one insect that concerns us right now, and that's spotted-winged Drosophila. So for those who don't know what it is, that's a fruit fly. Most fruit flies attack fruit that's overripe, but this one attacks fruit that's ripening. It is a major concern. It came in late summer, early fall of 2011. It's everywhere in Connecticut. Everyone has it. All of New England has it. And there right now is no predator or beneficial that will take it out. There's cultural practices you can do. They prefer cool, moist areas, so we try to keep our plants open enough so that the sunlight can get down in. That reduces the problems as well. Trying to keep them picked. So we are a pick-your-own operation. Some of the larger operations are pick your own, but may have a crew, and then the crew can come in after and keep the things picked, and that reduces their chances of having it. It doesn't eliminate it, but it really can reduce it quite a bit. So for a homeowner, I would say make sure you just keep your berries picked, and then it's not much of an issue. We don't spray our blueberries for it until the very end of the season because the spotted-wing Drosophila prefers raspberries and blackberries. So we decided 4 years ago to use that as a trap crop. So we do spray the raspberries and blackberries for the spotted-wing Drosophila, and found out that when our last raspberry is done in August, then we have to hit the blueberries at the end. Otherwise the Drosophila will move into the blueberries. Our first year, we were a little late on it, and we did get an infestation at that last weekend. So now we realized to back up a little bit. But it works, so that's what we keep doing. So I do put traps out. I have commercial lures that we use, and then I use apple cider vinegar as the drowning solution in the container. So we're not going to monitor all season long, because once the berries really start coming in, they're going to prefer the berries to the trap. But we use that early on. If you get them 2 weeks in a row, it's considered sustained. We know they're here. And once you have them, you have to manage it. We manage it by spraying insecticides. We have to do that once a week, unfortunately. We use materials that are 12 hours. We do at least for 24 hours, so we have it 24 to 36 hours from the time we spray before anybody ever comes into the field. Then we also have vegetables, and we aim for some of our vegetables to be ready when we open for strawberry season. Vegetables are not pick your own. Vegetables are not in the pick your own fenced-in area. They're in another part of the farm, and we pick them because we know when they're ripe. During the summer, if we end up with a lot of stuff that comes into one particular vegetable item that we know we aren't going to sell it all, we'll call the soup kitchen and send some down to them. So we grow a lot of it in tunnels. So we have tomatoes, peppers, several different kinds of lettuce, kale, garlic, beets, radishes, broccoli, eggplant, onions, green and yellow beans, melons, the cantaloupes, and then we have winter squash as well, several kinds of winter squash. And we do potatoes, red, white, and blue potatoes. But for varieties, we kind of switch it up. You know, if we find something we like, we stick with it. So we don't really necessarily stick with the same variety of anything every single year unless it's proven well and done well for us. Actually, we start all of our vegetables. We do peppers, lettuces. The only thing that I don't start from seed is beans. Beans we direct seed out into the field. So our squashes are in the field, but we start those plants in advance, both our summer and our winter squash too. The only vegetables that we order in are onions and potatoes. Our seeds come from several sources. We do Johnny's, we do Harris seeds, territorial seeds. Any place that has something that we really want to try. Sometimes I like to try something different and somebody else may have it, so we'll try that. And we try to get the seeds in the fall to make sure we have what we really want. I don't have a preference for organic or treated. I like pelleted seeds, so anything that I can get that's pelleted is a plus. If it's not pelleted, I don't really care. Some things only come in organic from some sources, and that's fine. Some things come treated. Doesn't bother me either way. So we go with the variety that we want, and if we have a choice of pelleted or non-pelleted, I go with the pelleted. Most of our vegetables are never sprayed. Anything in our tunnels is never sprayed. Our potatoes, Colorado potato beetle has hit them, so we did have to spray for Colorado potato beetle. Most of our vegetables, we don't spray them. So we have tomatoes that we start indoors in our house under lights, and then we move them out into a tunnel when they get to be about 10 to 12 inches tall. We have a high tunnel that we have double layer of plastic on to help insulation, and then we also heat the tunnel. We start all of our tomatoes. We did grafted one year and didn't see a big enough difference to make it worthwhile to do those anymore, so we just do regular tomato seeds. We do Rebelski and Geronimo are the large tomatoes that we have. They're the ones that have been proven to do really well in a high tunnel. And then we do a yellow cherry tomato and a red cherry tomato. We do about 400 or 500 tomato plants, all in the basement, all under lights, yeah. We start the tomatoes in early February. We add on a couple of weeks to the length of time needed. We start them under lights in our house, but by the time we move them out into the high tunnel, the days are still short. It adds some time to when we're actually going to get the tomatoes. So we add a couple weeks onto that one. So when we start the tomatoes in the house, we just use regular grow lights that you can get at any garden center, Home Depot, Lowe's, any of those places. You keep the tomatoes, the lights are just right down, practically on top of the tomato plants. If we kept them up high, then we end up with tall, lanky, skinny tomato plants. So we want to keep them, we want to keep it down low, and we just keep, every day we'll lift them up a little bit more as the plants start growing. so that we keep them a little stockier to start with. Those tomatoes are grown in bags with media. They're not in the ground in the soil. That way we don't have to worry about rotation. So we can grow them in that tunnel every single year. And they're all irrigated, and we heat the building in the winter. Right now we're trying to keep it cool. So we do put shade cloth over the tunnels to try to keep it cooler. In the tunnel, everything's irrigated. We have an automatic irrigation system. We put fertilizer through the irrigation system. So we have two different types of fertilizer we use in there. One is high in calcium, and the other is an all-purpose tomato fertilizer. Everything that grows in any of our high tunnels is fertilized through the irrigation system. Being in a tunnel, the honeybees don't like to go in there, so we do buy in bumblebees to do the pollination. Before the bumblebees arrive, if we have any flowers open, we go out there and hand pollinate, which is easiest. Flick them and move it, or use an electric toothbrush and go down there and hit them with an electric toothbrush, which we have done on many occasions. But bumblebees are great. So we just put the box right in the high tunnel with the tomatoes, and that takes care of our pollination. We did have an outbreak early this summer in our tomatoes of aphids, and we just ordered in beneficials, and that took care of the problem, so we don't have to worry about spraying for those. We occasionally get the green hornworm, and we wait for the parasitoid to take over, but if the parasitoid is getting a little slow, I take my clippers and I go out there and cut them in half. Green hornworms are nasty worms, and they do a lot of damage very quickly on your tomato plants. So we have a new herb garden. The old herb garden got a little overgrown and needed to be redone, so last year we redid it and put lavender all the way around, which I love lavender. So we have a couple different varieties of lavender in there. Everything's irrigated in the herb garden. We've done several basils. This year we had some germination issues, so we end up with putting some of it in a tunnel that people can go into and cut. So we have like 6 different basils we do. We have some perennial herbs as well in the herb garden. So go out there and cut your own herbs and bake with it. You know, they smell so nice too. It's just kind of nice to have it. We have a couple mints out there. We used to have 8 different mints in the old one, but it's hard to get rid of a mint once you get them. But they are nice, kind of nice to have them in tea. So flowers, we have a little over half an acre. We have about 21 different kinds of flowers. We have some perennials, mostly annuals. The rows are all labeled with what they are. It kind of helps people because some of them have particular things they like. We soil test that field prior to planting every 3 or 4 years, make an adjustment with lime if we need it, and then add whatever nutrients we need to get that up there. And that's also on the automatic irrigation system. Then we cover crop that flower field in the fall as well. Most of the flowers of the annuals we start from seed. There are some I buy in, like snapdragons. The seeds are so darn tiny. I just buy the plugs in, it's easier. Lysianthus look like little roses, and they're very pretty, different colors, but we buy those in as plugs too. I had several growers who told me you never want to start Lysianthus, unless you have a greenhouse. So for a few things like that, I do buy the plugs in. It's a convenience. We wait and start those in the high tunnel where the tomatoes are, because we have one side of the high tunnel on the south side that we just put benches on, and we start all of our flowers in there. So we look at how long it takes to germinate and kind of adjust our schedule so everything isn't started at one time. The annuals bloom all season, and the perennials, most of them we try to get their summer. Some of them will bloom early and then they're done. Some of them will bloom all season long, but most perennials just have a specific time during the summer when they like to bloom and they're done. So that's why we're heaviest to annuals, because the annuals will bloom all season long. You know, make notes which ones need to be with the netting to keep them straight, because some of them will flop, so you need a little bit of support. So Lysianthus is one that will use the netting. Same thing with snaps, they'll fall over as well. Then we try to get some greens in there as well, so if you make a bouquet, it's kind of nice to have some other greenery in there as a little accent. We do not monitor for insects and diseases on our flowers or our herbs, and we do no spraying on them at all. If I see Japanese beetles on something, I'll smack them. We just let Mother Nature take her course on that. With a lot of the flowers, even if the leaves were to get some diseases on them, you take the leaves off anyway when you do an arrangement, because they'll last longer. You don't want the leaves in the vase of water because it adds bacteria in there, it shortens the lifespan. So don't get worried about it. So we give you cutters, and if you bring a container, we'll put water in it for you. So we do have the events that people come in for flowers for. We've had a lot of weddings, a lot of wedding parties that will come in and cut their own flowers and make their own bouquets. We had one that came in a few years ago, brought their own wine, cheese, and crackers, made a party of it, so they had a good time. We also give free flowers away in the stand. So once the flowers come in, we try to cut a lot in the morning to have in there, and then we have a little sign on it that says, "Please enjoy a free flower." And we do that because it puts a smile on people's face. You know, I'm never going to run out of flowers. So why not just give everybody a flower, let them smile? To some people it really means a lot. So even if you come in and just look around and say, well, there's nothing I want here today, we still suggest, if you want it, take a flower. We have done classes in the past. It was kind of fun to do that. We did some for kids, we did some for adults. We haven't done them recently because I end up working full-time too. It's difficult to put them in. So when I retire, we'll probably start doing classes again. We have a compost pile, and all of our prunings go into the compost pile. Anything that's gone bad for vegetables, we throw into the compost pile. And then a couple of times during the year, we'll just take the tractor down and kind of push it around a little bit. We don't use it anywhere on the farm. It breaks down, we just kind of spread stuff out. So it's a passive compost pile. We don't use manure. We don't really have a source for it. We're hoping that with our cover cropping, it's added a lot to it, but once you get into the blueberries and raspberries and they're planted, you're not cover cropping. We're just looking at what we need, and we use whatever nutrients we need to get that up there. I think we fenced off everything we're going to do. We're not planning on expanding at this point. That might change down the road, but it's enough to keep us busy right now.